Hello, everyone. In this episode of Director Discussions, I am honored to sit down one of my favorite filmmakers, the amazing David Dobkin. I mean, let me just list off some of his films. You may know him as the director behind projects such as PIGEONS, Shanghai Knights, Wedding Crashers, Fred Claus, The Change Up, The Judge, and most recently, EUROVISION Song Contest. I just about managed to get that all into one breath. David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, sir. How are you doing today?
Of course, I'm doing great. Doing
No worries.
great.
I mean, that was just an intro I did off the top of my head. I didn't use a page. I just memorized it all. And no, I mean, so many different things to talk about. I mean, you've had such an interesting journey in the film world. I mean, is it true you got your start like same age as me PAing?
Yes, I worked at 14 years old. I got a job as the assistant to the location manager on a movie in New York called The Believers with Martin Sheen that actually John Schlesinger directed, of all things. And I had that experience that I think everybody had, especially at that age where, nobody really knew what film sets looked like. I mean, I had no source of internet or anything like that. So
Yeah.
the first time I walked on and I saw all of the lights and all of the people, I was already mystified by Star Wars when I was 8 years old, and I saw it
Yeah.
on the opening night. Changed my life.
There's your mug. Oh, dude.
And there's my mug, and it just so I had of course read everything I could about green screen and models and
Yeah.
special effects, and somehow none of it ever landed to the fact that movies were just incredibly creative, artificial kind of experience that also becomes alive when it's cut together and put
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
and the performances are real. And I was captivated by it. I really fell in love with it, but I would from a very early age.
You're making me look bad. You know, I thought I was ahead of the curve doing interviews at 14,
You
but
are.
you were working on a film set at that time, so you know I'm almost there anyway. But no, did you get your start? Did you jump straight into features? Because I know Clay Pigeons was your first feature, or was it music videos? What was the
Yes,
start for you?
I came to LA, intention was always to direct feature films.
Yeah,
But when I got here, music videos were really amazing. There were these directors, Matt Mahern,
oh yeah,
and uh, there were so many incredible videos being made at that time.
yeah,
The Jeremy video for Pearl Jam was incredibly powerful and effective, and it was like an art form that was growing. So I got very interested in that, and it seemed like young people were getting in.
yeah,
Um, I could not get signed anywhere, so I created my own company and called the record labels and repped myself and said, "Hey, I'm calling from Contraband Films. We have this new director. Can I send his reel?" And everybody just said yes because I got off the phone quickly, and I ended up getting two calls back, one at Interscope Records and one at Virgin, and a few months later, I ended up getting a song that I got to write a treatment for. And eventually, I got a call from Interscope and they said, "We have a music video. Can you write a treatment for?" And I wrote it and they said, "We really like it. We want you to go meet the artist." And
yeah,
I went and I eventually got the video and it was Tupac. And it ended up being what opened up my career. And I
yeah,
ended up doing two videos with him that were both very successful and kind of were his moment of popping into the mainstream with "I Get Around" and "Keep Your Head Up," which was really
amazing.
an amazing thing. And ironically, later on, I did a video for Coolio, who just passed away last week.
Yeah,
That was I won an MTV award for, but it was the rap world was really
yeah,
amazing. I ended actually loved rap and it was always into it, so I could somehow fit in. But it was an incredible journey, like most movies are. The other thing, as a filmmaker, one of the great experiences is that you get to not only have that experience that we have when the lights go out and you go into a world, but you get to go be in that world and understand it and learn it as a
yeah.
filmmaker when you take on any project that you take on. So, but I did start there. But before I did that, in all truth, my first paying job as a filmmaker was directing karaoke videos.
Yeah.
And my roommate, who was my cinematographer, who I had met in film school at NYU, was like, "Hey, I'm getting a job. I've been shooting these karaoke videos. Would you like to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, man. You get $1,000 for directing it. They give you $6,000 to make it, and you go out and shoot people running on the beach and doing like it was so lame, but I was so happy, and I was making money and I was shooting film and I taught myself how to edit. So I could save that $200 and buy a little bit more film. And it was a great experience. So I actually, you know, one of my things that I always advise people is always be out there shooting, because there's never, you will learn every time you shoot. And now you can, you know, you go out with this thing and edit it on this thing and write your music in your bedroom. I mean, it's unbelievable. I really believe we are about to see a generation of filmmakers who are extraordinary, because the language is secondhand. They've been doing it and creating all along, you know. For me, I was shooting little Super 8 movies and trying to cut them together, and the tape would be, you know, it was such a nightmare.
Tape? What's a tape? You know?
Yeah, exactly. We would cut it and tape it, and you know, and then you'd run it through the projector, and it would just be every edit would be terrible, and you couldn't tell what it was. It was fun. The desire was there, but now it's a whole other thing, and I think it's really exciting. I know at some point I'm going to pick up my phone and make a movie on my phone.
Steven Soderbergh did that, didn't he? I think it was called. I mean, he just does everything, though. I mean, he has like.
I know he shoots as well. I mean, he's a genius. So you know, that's
he has 400 films. So I mean, one of them's bound to be at some rate. But no, that's interesting. I've talked to the filmmaker Derek C in France, and he does a lot of commercials as well. And he says it's kind of a fun thing to stretch his muscles. Is that the same for music videos for you?
Absolutely it was. And you know, look, I did a spec commercial for the Utah Symphony when I was doing videos, and it won some awards and was in Communication Arts Magazine, which is some industry magazine. And I got a call from Ridley Scott's commercial company, and where I've been ever since. And so once I got into commercials over there, the opportunity, and it's something that Tony said to me, he's like, GM's going to sell cars anyways, don't worry. You just go out there, play with the toys, use their money to figure out how to use cranes and all these other things, and wire cams. And you know, he really encouraged me to stretch and play. And I do think commercials are an incredible place to kind of learn all of that. And you learn how to tell a story in 30 seconds, which was very hard for me. I'd set up these long shots, and then you chop them into like one piece and of the shot that you set up. It took me a while, but when you learn to tell a story in a short amount of time, or you learn to tell a joke in a short amount of time, you get better at it. You boil down to the essentials, and the essentials are performance and storytelling, and you know, and how you've made it look, and it makes your decision making cleaner. And I think it did make me a better filmmaker. And in fact, I think that, you know, we'll get to talking about it, but Wedding Crashers never would have been that movie without my commercial career, for sure.
Yeah, man, that's so interesting. I mean, some I love. I mean, we'll talk about your comedy work. For anyone who's like, you're an amazing comedy director, but you've discussed this. This is something that's really interesting to me. You were like, you could not pick a scene from any one of my comedy films that I couldn't describe to you as a drama. The way you shoot it, it's really. Could you kind of expand on that for everyone?
Yeah, that's funny. I almost am suspicious you've heard me say that. But because I went to film school, because I had to get my hands on a camera, you know, I think I probably would have been, I never thought I'd end up in comedy. I was a class clown, and I had a big mouth, and everything I did though was irreverent and rated R. So it didn't feel like that was something I was going to find in movies. I wanted to either make Star Wars, obviously, or like Dog Day Afternoon or Apocalypse Now. Like those were
2-hour silent French film about grief.
Yeah.
You know,
Lenny, whatever, you know, like I wanted to make something really, the art of it is really what captured me. And I was also interested in the commercial size of big emotions and big screens and all that. But I found once I got into comedy, and strangely enough, I didn't realize that when Ridley signed me, he was signing me because I was a comedy director. I didn't realize that once I did this little Utah Symphony commercial, that it was going to be, oh, you're comedy dialogue. You're a performer. Like there's these places they put you. I thought I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go make Alien, you know, like, and I ended up being a comedy guy. I was very successful, and it was really fun. And you learn as you go, and the commercials are great for comedy because it's short. You're 2 months later, you're in a sports bar, and it comes on, and you have an audience, you have a test audience all the time, so you get to understand the work much quicker than, you know, features are frustrating. You read the script, you work on it, or you write the script. It's years and years of creation and so many voices and people involved. And by the time you get to put your work up in front of an audience, you've taken that swing. It's done, you know, then it's just trying to improve it. So commercials are incredible. They're an incredible experience. What was your question?
Something about something, you know, shooting drama and comedy being the same.
Shooting drama. So the interesting thing is when I went to NYU and I was there as kind of shooting and trying everything on, I realized I did not know how to direct actors. In all of my movies, the acting was very realistic. There was realism to it. You know, Jaws is like the best performances of any Spielberg movie. You know, like, and that and Close Encounters have the 70s in them. You can feel them, that kind of performance. And I was very excited by that. So I directed some theater when I was there. And then I took acting classes, even though I really don't like being in front of a camera, but I really felt like, oh, I should really know what this is.
Yeah.
I took Stanislavski, Strasberg, Meisner, Adler, like I took them all. I was like, and then I got to Hollywood and found out half of the people don't do anything. They just are gifted. People like Joaquin Phoenix, who has no training, but is just a genius, you know, and a savant. So for me, directing comedy was always, here's the character, here's the situation, this is what we know they want, here's what they're now colliding with. And that is where comedy always came from for me. And I use a funny example. In Wedding Crashers, there's a scene where the gay brother gets on the bed with him. In the script, he didn't get in the bed. He was sitting in the room, and Vince is tied to the bed, right? And you're like, and by the way, that's all directed as a drama. We're not trying to be funny. It's just a funny situation. Like, you have to understand Vince and the girl and why he's tied to the bed. You have to set up the gay brother. Like, all these things came together for this scene. So we're in rehearsals, and what I normally do, and this is again just a dramatic, it's directed as drama, but the intention is how much more uncomfortable can it get? That's the game I play with myself. And I'm like, well, it would be really funny if he got on the bed now. So let's try it. So he gets on the bed. Vince is a great actor. He's like freaking out. He's playing his character. So all that funny stuff starts to happen. The next funniest thing was, well, maybe someone should walk in on them. What's the worst person to walk in?
Christopher Walken rolls up,
the dad, and it's Chris Walken. So now we have him coming in. Now all the jokes about get in the closet come out. So you're now, everything's starting to work. He comes in the room. All right, so now what happens? He's tied to the bed. Let's keep the room dark. He's going to come sit on the bed. All right, that's the next most uncomfortable thing. And we were building it and building it. And it's funny because Owen then had this idea, even though he's not in the scene, but he said to me, he goes, oh, hey, you know, because it was described as mutilated genitals in the script, is what the painting was. And we were like, and he goes, wouldn't it be funny if it was a painting of Vince? Because he's having these feelings for Vince. Maybe he's in the Garden of Eden, he's stealing the apple. And that was where the painting came from. And it made it so funny because when the dad looks up, he sees that it's Vince, and he looks back, he's trying to put it with all the, and then he got to kind of ignore his own information, pull on the rope, and leave. So that whole set piece is built, but performed as drama. And the fact that you saw that is really, it's very heartwarming for me, because the acting in those scenes is always so important to me. No one's getting to try to be funny. As soon as you try to be funny, you end up with Ocean's 12. We're self-aware. We know everyone loved us as these characters. And that little bit of awareness ruins the magic. Now you're acting into the funny instead of acting into every scene as it really would be for your character. And, you know, I think they course corrected it with Ocean's 13, which I liked, but that happens a lot on sequels, especially comedy sequels. Everybody knows what everyone loved, you know, or you end up with these situations where you end up with Al Pacino for 10 years, winning an Oscar for a certain performance, and then repeating that kind of performance over and over again.
I mean, and so much of comedy, I feel, is editing. Not a lot of people appreciate, but like the beats, how long you wait between, something may not be funny if a character says it right afterwards. You put in 2 seconds, someone's reaction shot. I feel like a lot of people don't appreciate.
So smart. You're so smart. That's called, you know, it's all rhythm. It's all rhythm. And it's interesting, when I went to go make Wedding Crashers specifically, I went in and I knew a lot of comedies, to my experience and to my experience in the 2 that I had made before, is that you're telling a story and then you got to build all this energy for the comedy piece, set piece. And then it subsides, and then you got to keep raising it up again. And I was like, I hate that. I want to make it in, I don't want a 4/4 movie.
Yeah.
I want to do it in 3/4 or a waltz or something. You know, I want it to be an up-paced movie that
Yeah.
keeps its rhythm high so it blends right in through the comedy. And when I slow down, it feels like it's a character moment. There's a sense of suspended animation. When we finally slow down at the beach with Rachel and Owen,
Yeah.
it's so nice to slow down and be with them because we've been at this breakneck comedy pace the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But that was a very intentional kind of idea, and it was an editing idea. But it was also built off the rhythms of Vince.
Yeah. I mean,
Because,
totally. Yeah.
you know, he has a rhythm, and I wanted the movie to match his rhythm, you know, the film itself. The other thing that I really learned about editing, comedy editing, and it was when I went to go do Shanghai Nights with Jackie Chan, and he said to me at one point, he said, "Are you doing coverage of my face for the whole scene?" I said, "Of course, your close-ups will have all of your reactions." He goes, "Good." He goes, "You know, if you're in a scene and it's not funny, before you change anything, just cut to my face." And I was like, okay, like, and he was right.
Yeah. Was he right?
His reaction shots to you see the movie through him. So
Yeah.
when you're following a character, that reaction shot to not understanding or thinking something's not right or thinking the comedy, I can't tell you, there's a dozen big laughs in that movie that were there because he gave me that one note. And it's something that I've always kept,
Yeah.
which is that, and that's a rhythm thing too. The other thing that's very weird about rhythms in comedy, and I will tell you this from Eurovision,
Yeah.
is we were in the first test screening for the movie, and we were making it for Netflix. And during the movie, they were laughing really hard at something in the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And I turned to my editor, and we do a thing where I said, "Open that up a little bit, put in, you know, so before that next line, people were laughing over something Will
Yeah.
said. We couldn't hear Rachel's line because they were laughing. So you would do things when you were screening in a theater where you open it up or add a reaction shot or
Yeah.
create that pause that you're talking about. And then the next joke can land, and you kind of carry the comedy and keep people elevated. And my editor looked at me and goes, "Dude, it's gonna be 6 people on a couch. They'll hear it." And it broke my heart because it was the first time I realized I wasn't gonna have a big audience for the movie in a theater. And there is something special about comedy in a theater when
Yeah.
everybody's laughing. I mean, my memories of Dumb and Dumber or even like Stir Crazy when I was a kid, you know, the Silver Streak, those Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor movies, or Trading Places or 48 Hours, which was seminal for me.
Yeah.
That was probably the movie that matched my tone the most as a kid. And I was in the
Yeah.
theater, and when Eddie Murphy went into the honky tonk bar and said, "I'm a N-word with a badge,"
Yeah.
the place went insane. And you could never have had that understanding of what that moment was without that. And it makes me sad. I do think people are going to start going back to the movies. I think
Yeah, there
that,
are some things you just have to see in cinema. Like I put off watching Jaws until 2 weeks ago. I had never seen Jaws until 2 weeks ago. I was back in cinemas and I went
yes,
to the cinema and I watched. I was like, I'm not, because every director I talked to, they're like, "Oh yeah, Jaws was the film." Watching it in theaters, I was like, "Well, that must be the juice, the secret. Go to see Jaws in theaters." And it was like, "Yeah, you can't
yes.
watch it. Can't watch it anywhere else."
And what did you think when you saw it?
It was amazing. You know, I mean, it was where you build it up in your head and you go in and you're thinking, like you can't help but feel, "Oh, I'd say this would be dated," but even the
Yeah,
shark doesn't ruin it. I mean,
the
you
shark
can't help but
doesn't
love
ruin
it.
it. It's
Good.
so weird, and it doesn't matter that it looks fake. He's psychologically
Yeah,
gotten you to the point where you are concerned for the characters, you know, and it's a masterpiece of a movie. I mean, there's everything going on in it, you know.
definitely.
The character work is brilliant. The scene with the
Oh, the
kid at
hug
the
me. Why? Because I
table
need it.
and all of that, and I just those movies are truly timeless. You know, my son, I showed him he really wanted to see The Shining when he was like 11, and I was like,
Yeah.
you know, read the book and I'll show it to you. So he read the book, and then he was 12, and I was like, okay, I got to show him The Shining. I showed it to him on you know, here at home,
Yeah.
and he was like, he thought it was good, and then he wanted a friend of his to go see it. And it was playing in a theater, and they went to go see it. And he came home. He's like, the movie is 10 times better than I understood. He
Yeah.
goes, and he had the same experience the experience you did on the back end, which was like, I love that movie. And it was scary. He goes, I didn't think it was scary when we watched it at
Yeah.
home. I watched it with an audience. I thought parts of it were terrifying.
Yeah, it's collective, I feel, if you're
Yeah,
with, like, that's what I love about cinema
collective,
when you
yeah.
go in. Yeah, totally. And let me talk to you about this. This is something that's so fascinating about your work. You look at the start, Clay Pigeons is kind of this black comedy in a way. I guess you could say comedy. And then you go Shanghai Nights, a PG comedy, Wedding Crashers, an R comedy. Then you go, you know, Fred Claus, a Christmas film. And probably my favorite film out of all your works, The Judge. I know I mentioned this in my initial email. I mean, The Judge, like, you just don't believe in picking easy work, do you? You're just constantly changing.
My agents hate me. They hate me because as soon as I do something, I get interested in something else, which is part of just being a film lover, you know?
Yeah.
I could have made $1 bazillion and kept going forever if I had made a sequel to Wedding Crashers. And immediately, right after.
Yeah,
but
really?
we couldn't come up with it. We couldn't come up with a story that was great or was original. And I didn't want to make the same movie again. I really felt we had done exactly what we wanted on the first one. And it's not easy to get them right, you know, like
Yeah.
hard as we intend. And Duncan said something about this, like you can put all of your heart and soul and you believe you're making the right decisions, but when it comes together, it's still art.
Yeah.
And it still is of its time and the moment and the thing. And in fact, The Judge is a really good example because when we got some of the good reviews for that movie, like Rex Reed, he was like, it's sad because 20 years ago, this movie would have been an Oscar contender for Robert and for, you know, other things, and not just for Duvall, and who deserved it and was amazing. But, you know, it's not it was not something that was really embraced in cinema. We made it as a studio movie as opposed to an independent movie, so it got viewed through that lens.
Yeah.
And it I think that unfortunately it suffered for its run, its theatrical run during that time. It has since garnered a huge kind of more people bring that movie up to me. It's amazing how how people have found that film. But it is something that, you know, my whole life I've been directing drama, so it didn't seem that different to me. When I went to go make that movie, it was just another story, and it was something that I probably should have leaned a little more into the comedy. Downey said to me, he's like, "Why are you putting your fastball aside?" He's like, "You're only using it in the first act." And I was like, it doesn't, I see where we could have gone with some of it. But at the time we were trying to make something that was kind of a throwback, that was older, that was like a Sidney Lumet movie.
Yeah, I love it, man.
With coverage and acting and not me pushing the camera all over the place. You know, it's interesting. There twice in my life I made the choice to do less as a director. And for me, it really worked. And the other time was actually in Clay Pigeons, when all these music video directors were making movies and they were all moving and they were, and I was like, oh, I cannot do that. I do not want to, even though I've come from music videos as well.
Yeah.
So I thought it was punk rock. And I remember saying to Vince, I'm like, the movie's going to be slow.
Yeah.
You're going to sit in the cinema and you're going to move along with this film. And it's going to be about performances. It's going to be delicate. The comedy is going to be super dry.
Yeah.
And it was blood simple in my head, you know?
Yeah.
Where actually you think, which is one of my favorite movies when I was younger. Have you ever seen that movie?
Which movie?
Blood Simple, the Coen brothers' first movie.
No, I've seen a lot of the Coen brothers, not their first one.
Dude, the whole start of the movie, you think you were in a drama.
Yeah.
And then the camera is moving along a bar and there's a guy who's drunk and passed out and the camera stops and goes over the guy. And you realize there's a whole other thing going on. And that I never was able to shake that. And
that's the David Dobkin recommendation. All right, that's it. Do you want to hear?
Hopefully you like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. Do you want to hear The Judge story? So, I mean,
yes.
we caught it on Netflix, but that day, me and my dad's deaf. So, I mean, we were up in Leitrim, which is up in Ireland, and we were at my nanny's house. We were watching, a sci-fi film. I won't say what. And my nanny was like, "This is rubbish." And we were like, "No, sci-fi is a hard miss for her." So after that was finished, we watched another film, The Judge. And when it finished, she goes, "Well, it was better than the first one." So that's high praise from my granny. So I mean, you can put that up on the posters or something.
I'm gonna do it better than the first one.
Yeah. So there you go. But no, I mean, let me ask you this: what are some films? I mean, my couple of last questions, and we're almost approaching that time. What are some films that made you want to be a filmmaker?
it was in stages. Star Wars was the first. Star Wars was a spiritual experience in the
Yeah.
theater. I mean, it was, I can't even explain how transporting it was and why people like me went 17 times. You know, it was like, you just kept wanting to get back to it.
Yeah.
And then the next movie that really changed things for me is when I was 12 and I saw Apocalypse Now.
Oh man.
That was when I was like, oh my God, this is visual poetry. The language opened up and I was like, oh my God. And then I got interested in, you know, Jules and Jim and 400 Blows and all these other kind of movies started to kind of come into my awareness. And then I saw Dog Day Afternoon when I was about 14 or 15. And I
Yeah.
bring that up because there's a piece of music in the opening and there's a piece of music in the end, and the rest of the movie is silent except for dialogue.
Man.
And that movie was funny and heartbreaking and had a tone to it that I really was blown away with. And so those movies really, really affected me. And they became where I thought my target was going to be.
Yeah. Dude, what's your dream project as a filmmaker? You could do anything. What is it?
You know, it's interesting. I've had these moments when, you know, people come. I used to think it was to do a Star Wars movie, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure anymore, dude. I mean, but part of what I love is you're gonna go through the frustration of my agents who are like, "You're doing what now?" You know, like, and I always want to move it around,
Yeah.
and um, it's the next thing that grabs my attention. Look, Eurovision.
Yeah.
I got a phone call from my agent said, "There's this script that's coming. It's about a singing contest." I was like, "No, no, that's not. I'm never going to do that."
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, you have a great background in music, though, and you love music." And I used to be a sound mixer for some live bands in New York that became bigger. And I was like, no. And then I get a phone call a week later going, Will Ferrell's in the movie, and he really wants you to read it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to read it for Will. I trust Will. And I read the script. First of all, I get it. It's 89 pages. I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, it's not even a finished script yet, but I read it. It's so funny. It's so heartwarming. The Iceland thing is something I had never,
Yeah.
like the comedy that came, I was like, oh my God, it was so funny. I loved it. And I call him up after, or I called my agent. I don't remember who it was. And I said, look, I actually love it. And I love the fact that I'm going to be able to create all the music.
Yeah.
But they got to change the title. Eurovision, this is a horrible title. Like, and it was either Will or my agent said, well, it's a real thing. So I don't think they're going to change the title.
You
And I'm
didn't
like,
know.
I have no idea. Most people in America don't know. And so I go on the internet and I'm looking and I'm like, oh my, I mean, it's like discovering the dark web. It's,
Yeah.
you know, millions of pages of every performance and people's best top 10 lists. And I'm like, holy shit, what is this?
Yeah.
And it's a TV show, but it's in front of a live audience in a 20,000 seat stadium. And I'm like, there's nothing like this in America.
Yeah.
So it took me days of understanding what this thing was and why it was created, but I fell in love with it. But it was the movie that I said absolutely not to, you know, and a bunch of
Yeah.
times. And it was one of the most enjoyable, fun movies. I'm so into Eurovision now. And it has a tone that's so special, and Americans don't get it.
Like it shouldn't work as a film, but it does.
Well, that's why, is I made it for people who love Eurovision, you know, and they were afraid that Americans weren't going to understand it. And I was like, it works. I believed it worked in the script. I know they've changed some of the rules, but the rules have been changed before, and it has the love and the essence. And we did it from a place of loving it, not of parodying it. Don't worry about the clock. If we parodied it, it would have been terrible. And I don't like movies that make fun of things that people love.
Yeah.
I just haven't, I don't find comedy in that, you know, and again, because my characters are directed from a real place, and I want there to be an adoration. One of the most satisfying things when Eurovision came out is that so many people in Europe loved it and was like, oh, I thought this thing was going to be rubbish, and it ended up being really beautiful, and it became cult-like. And in fact, Netflix at one point said, we have a problem with your movie because people keep watching it over and over and over and over again. I was like, why is that a problem? They're like, because you're not watching anything else. They're like, if it's in the box office, that's wonderful. But when it's on Netflix and they're watching it like 5, 6, 7 times,
yeah,
it doesn't boost what we do. There's no more subscribers. There's no more, you know.
yeah.
It was really fascinating, but it has it was very beloved. And I have to say, like, everywhere I go, that movie has somehow very quickly become, maybe it was because it was COVID and everyone
it was that period, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was right during, you know, we had to take down the marketing campaign because we were afraid that during the Black Lives Matter marches and they're shooting tear gas at people in front of the White House, that we're out there going, let's have fun. So they had to scale pull all the marketing away. The movie still did great, knock on wood, but it was something that got seen, by the way, also as a filmmaker, this is part of the magic of Netflix.
Yeah.
You can't have 25 million people watch a movie in one weekend. Like, I don't even think that's possible in the theaters, you know, unless you're like Avatar and you have every screen, which is incredible. So the amount of reactions of people, everyone, filmmakers I hadn't heard of in forever, or was incredible. You know, it was a different experience and really wonderful by its own right. So people did also share something in a very different way. I still wished I could have, you know, I took the actors to the theater on the last, I made Rachel come in and Will for the last preview that we did in America. Because I was like, you're never going to see this with 300 people again, and you need to see how this runs. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
I mean, it's like one of those things, if you hate or love Eurovision, everyone watches it here. I mean, half of
like, you know, that's what's funny. In England, especially, and you're in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are funny. But first of all, there's the whole thing with the Irish thing, which is that you kept winning and everybody was afraid that you'd go bankrupt if you kept winning. And that was where we stole the idea from, was that, what was it, Logan? I forgot the name of the guy that he won twice, right? But you guys, there was this period of time when you kept winning and it's very expensive to put on the show. And that's where they got that idea for, you're going to make Iceland bankrupt if you win. So that whole subplot, but it's amazing in England. By the way, I loved it. The year after Brexit, you got no points.
dude. I mean, that's why I hate it. That's why I get very patriotic. Like if it's any other day, but when I'm watching it, I'm like, you know what? I hate them all. Ireland's on top, and then I'm like, you know, I get the flag out.
Yeah.
Oh, we're all watching Eurovision.
And by the way, even the people that don't watch the contest watch the scoring.
Yeah.
Like they're parties and people get together and, you know, and everybody makes fun of it. So when I was shooting in London, my crew members would come up to me when we were done shooting something like, you know, the music's really good, but it's better than Eurovision. So it's really not realistic. And I was like, well, people have to enjoy it in the movie as well. But look, England had that incredible guy last year that I believe if it wasn't for the Ukraine war, he would have won.
With the spaceman guy, wasn't it?
Spaceman guy.
Yeah.
I mean, a great song. It was like an Elton John song sung by this bearded crooner, and it was so incredible. I mean,
it was good. It was good, but Ireland was better. You know, that's just. I mean, we
like, don't mix me up with London, dude. Don't with England.
We'll remain civil. No, David. One of my last questions, just to get my article. Wedding Crashers 2.
Okay, so we were prepping it.
Yeah.
I scouted for it. We have an incredible story. And we're still in very distant discussions about it. So there's a difference of opinion as to whether a movie like that fits into our world now or not. I know it does.
It has to be right.
I know the way that I do things, it does, because all of my work is very human.
Yeah.
You know, there were people that were really afraid that I was making jokes in Eurovision about him being gay, and making pronoun jokes, but I'm like, I'm not making fun of him though. That's not what the joke is. It's kind-hearted, and in the end, he was doing something he thought was right for her as well.
Yeah,
he's not a bad guy, right? In fact, he's right. He is correct that she's being ignored by the guy. He helps them learn their lesson. But
definitely.
I said, and they were really concerned about it. They're like, well, we think this movie could be really big with that part of our population, and I'm like, it will be, and I disagree
Yeah.
with you, and I stick to my guns because I don't do things in a mean way. By the way, when I did Wedding Crashers, the head of marketing brought me in, Russell Schwartz, who also was the person that greenlit Clay Pigeons, my first movie, and he goes, "How are we selling this? These guys are predators." And
Whoa.
I was like, what? And I had never even seen it from that point. He goes, they lie about who they are, go into parties, weddings, and pick up girls so they can sleep with them.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a seduction. That's how seductions go. We all lie about who we are when we meet people. We put our best selves forward. And I said, but it's not going to come off that way.
Yeah,
They
you're right.
love food. They love the grandparents. They have fun dancing. They like the kids.
It's the atmosphere.
And they make the weddings better.
Yeah.
They are not there to, and it's from their positive energy that the girls are attracted. I said, and you're making it as if women don't have a choice. It was a very old-fashioned view of women. And we had the same issue come up. So, and that is how the movie works, by the way. That
it would have been a horror film if they marketed it that way, you know?
But look, a lot of men in America, and you know, look, they went and made a TV show of this idea, which Vince and I were really against. They sold the title for Ashton Kutcher to make a show. But unlike Punk'd, in Punk'd, you're making fun of celebrities.
Yeah.
You're not making fun of normal people. So you can laugh at celebrities.
You can't punch down.
You can't punch down. Exactly, man. So Daniel, they went and made this TV show. It ran one episode, and people were like, "What? You're tricking the people on their own wedding day?" They were disgusted, and it didn't work. But that's the difference of point of view, and what happens from sensibility. So I know I could make Wedding Crashers today, and it still wouldn't offend. And in fact, 60% of that audience was women.
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
Dudes think it's a guy movie. It's a female movie dressed as a guy movie, because the guys change enough to become, it goes from sex to love.
There's a shift.
They grow, but they also don't. The reason guys loved it too is that we don't apologize for who we were, which we shouldn't have to. You know, Owen at the end says,
I don't regret it all, you know?
Yeah, I goes, it got me to you, right? He's like, yeah, I slept with a lot of women. Like, you know, like you're like usually like, ooh, but he's honest and he's being real and he loves this girl. And the smart thing was we didn't go full romantic comedy, which is, you know, the line that saves that movie in the end, which I believe was an Owen line, was when he said, I'm not asking you to marry me, right? This isn't The Graduate. Yeah. I'm just saying don't marry him.
Yeah.
And that line makes it still realistic. Again, it's and people laugh. That's a huge laugh, but it's a grounded drama. It's what that character would say. And those kinds of things signal to the audience where the sensibility is, and makes the end of the movie work, you know? Yeah. And they talk about taking the girls crashing at the end, which is so cool, you know, which I think was Vince's thing. He's like, we should take them crashing. You know, we don't have to give it up. Amazing. And I thought it was just brilliant, you know, because what they love, again, is the weddings. They love the crash. They don't need, it's not just about sleeping with the women. So that was, it's really, really important to know it. So Wedding Crashers 2, I'm fighting to make it real. And we finally, by the way, many years later, every year they call me, what do you think of, and I'm like, And then a few years ago, about 5 years ago, they called and I hung up the phone and I'm like, I know a lot of guys that are in their mid 40s to 50s. Yeah. That never found the relationships to have families. It just didn't work out, or whatever happened, or life took them to different places, or in this business, it's hard to keep your relationships going, you know? And I had some male friends who were talking about missing that opportunity. And that's when I realized we can make them single again at 45, 50 now. Yeah. And be like, but we're going to these weddings and we'll never be those guys.
It gives it that real heart, that realness.
That's right. So now I had a movie I could build a comedy off of because it's real. And it's, by the way, it's our culture right now. Yeah. And I love those. One of my favorite filmmakers that I've learned a lot from as a writer is Nancy Meyers. I know she makes big commercial movies, but she always finds a station in life that's been unexplored in the culture to tell the movie. I'm a single mom, a divorced mother who's in the empty nest moment of my life. Now you have, it's complicated, you know?
Yeah.
Or I'm a widow, or I'm a man who still wants to work, and I'm too old and I want to go back and try to be useful. The Intern, with De Niro being the intern for,
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
and those are, I love that those comedies are built on
Real people.
drama, real people, real drama. It makes them funnier, and we have an access point to go into the movie. So I love this Wedding Crashers sequel now, because it does explore men and the ideas of love and marriage and what you do as an older person, and looking back and finding a ways to have a second chance at that moment in time. So that's kind of what a sketch of what the movie's about. But we'll cross our fingers we can get everybody on board.
David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, sir. My last question, what advice would you have for anyone looking to become a filmmaker?
Go out with this. First of all, write.
Yeah.
If you can write well, you have something that's worth shooting. So learning to write is really important, okay? If you can do that. Because when you write a good script, Sylvester Stallone goes, I wrote this script, Rocky, and they said, we're going to give you $5 million in 1973, which is like $30-40 million today, to not be the lead.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm the lead of this movie.
Man.
And he wrote the movie. He had control of the film. He was the lead of the movie, and he won an Oscar, and he changed his whole life. So writing is the first place where all storytelling begins, number one. Then if you have something, write something you can shoot on this, and go find real actors. Don't do it with your friends, right? Unless they're real actors. Go find real actors. There's a lot of great actors that need to go work, that don't get work. You know what I mean? You'll find them. And go make your movie and edit it on your thing, and have your friend who's a musician or yourself score it, and then put it out there. I mean, that was never available. I went to film school. The reason I chose NYU over USC and UCLA, because they were the only school that said everybody gets to make a thesis film. I was like, I got to make it. I can't find out that I wrote the script and then I'm going to be the producer on the film. Like, I want to direct, so I don't want to go into it. Now everybody can direct all the time. I mean, you know, honestly, you see some of these things that people do even on TikTok, and they're all laymen, and they're really good at making people laugh and rhythms, and so, I mean, it's incredible, you know.
We're in a new era, I feel, especially.
A new era. My kids watch people play video games. I thought this was insane. I was like, play video games, all right? We have enough of an issue with you. Now you want to watch people play? And then one day my kid was like, dude, the League of Legends finals are on. Can we please watch it? And I turned it on. There's like sports announcers. You see the faces of people playing. There's like a thing on the side where people are typing in, and I was like, oh my God, like it's a full on. And by the way, I got sucked in.
You were taking bets on it.
I was really into it, and I'm like, okay. And that's when you know the world has changed, because, you know, it's incredible. It's incredible. So my advice is write and go out and do it. And by the way, just because the first thing you do is not going to be good.
Yes. Yeah.
Just get that. Just don't give up then. You know, honestly, if you saw all the things that I shot when I was younger, and by the way, some of the commercial campaigns I screwed up. And Tony Scott was right. GM still sold all their cars and everything was fine, but I had some disastrous commercials go the wrong way. I had to do a commercial once with Pete Sampras, the tennis player, and he had torn his Achilles heel and had a huge cold sore on his face because he was so stressed out. He thought his career was over. And that was the day that I showed up, and no one had known that but me. And I'm like, well, he can't talk because he's like this. I can't tell. He's got this glowing blister on his face, and he can't move. He can't play tennis. And the whole commercial was him making jokes and playing. And I said, guys, you have to call the insurance company. And they were like, no, we need the commercial. And I mean, it came out horrible. I was like, I don't know what to do. I can dolly behind the net and try to pretend like he's moving. I don't know what I do, you know?
It's a learning.
Up there with ideas, and they're going to be, and the truth about filmmaking is nothing it takes so much for things to come out the way that you envision it. You know,
Yeah.
everything has to line up, and you learn to become skilled at creating the environment for your actors to perform in, because that's ultimately, at the end of the day, the movie can look like shit.
Yeah.
It can't be written badly, and it can't be performed badly. The way that it's looked and the way that it's shot does not ultimately matter compared to the performances and the writing. Those two things, and by the way, the judge is a perfect example. And, you know, I wanted to move the camera more at one point, but then I watched the verdict and I was like, oh man, he's so patient. He just sits there. And I was
Yeah.
like, I want to do that. And I knew that with D'Onofrio and
Oh
Vera,
yeah, yeah.
Duvall and Downey and Jeremy Strong, all these people working for these performances, I'm like, I can't have a dolly move mess up someone's moment. I
Yeah.
don't want to find out that I missed a focus pull while Downey's crying on the stand, you know? And sometimes I drop two cameras for the close-up
Yeah.
so that I knew one of them, if one of them wanted to move, the other one was sitting there.
Yeah.
Because the performances were really, really important. In fact, Downey's performance at the very end where he says the line and a tear comes out, that was one time on the last take, and it was a very funny moment.
When Billy Bob Thornton walks up to him, the Dwight Dick Twickenham, is that part?
No. He comes up and shakes the dad, and the dad says the thing he shouldn't say, and the son's like, shit.
Yeah.
And he gets up there and he realizes that his father let this guy go because he thought he was him. And he goes, I looked at him and I saw you.
Yeah, yeah.
So the line before, which is not sticking in my head, was a line that Robert saw and was like, we can't say that line. I know it reads really good, but it reads like a piece of writing, you know, and sometimes he's right. A really good written line sometimes can feel like writing, but it feels like the Hollywood line, right?
Yeah.
We were trying to avoid being Hollywood, which is probably why I pulled too much of the comedy out. But we had done 6 takes, and Susan looked at me, who's a great producer, his wife, and I was like, she's like, are you gonna ask him? I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to ask him. And then all of a sudden, Robert goes, can I get one more? Can you just, one more, let's just go right away. And he did it, and it was the only time he did that line. It's the only time that it came out. It's the only time he cried. Everything happened.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I had had something that pushed in on him, you may have a focus pull that's out, you know, and I've had moments. There are moments in Shanghai Nights I was shooting anamorphic, and Owen is completely out of focus for a couple of those moments. Really? You're just editing quickly out of it so that you don't see it. But
can you not even look back at some of your films? Is it hard for you?
Oh no, I love it. But by the way, no, they're easier. In the first 10 years, all I do is go, I should have trimmed that, and I should have cut that, and that piece of it should be less. It's mixed too hot. And you know, we premiered at the Toronto Film Festival with the judge, and I walked out and I pulled 5 music cues completely out of the movie. And they were good music cues, but I realized the emotion was there so much that it did not need to be pushed.
Yeah.
I was like, is my insecurity that was wanting to underline it. You know, when Duvall is alone speaking to his wife at the grave, there was my favorite cue that Thomas Newman wrote. And I was like, it's too much. I could feel it with the audience. They know it already, and now I'm pushing them away because I'm saying the same thing that they're feeling already.
Yeah.
So I pulled that cue out, and that scene ran way better. I mean, like, it was exactly the way it was supposed to. And, you know, after you've screened it like that, normally you're not supposed to, they never let you back in. And I was lucky because Lawrence Bender got into my car on the way to the after party and said, I've had Quentin do it. So I called up Susan, no, for real? And I said, yeah, I want to do it.
If
and
Quentin can do it, I can do it.
But I was just like, well, I didn't even know people did it. I just needed evidence. It sounded ridiculous when I said Quentin did it. And she's like, oh, okay. But she made it happen, and we pulled it out. And I'm so happy, because if that hadn't happened, that movie specifically probably would have broken my heart, because that was a very personal movie. And it was about my relationship with my mom. That was very, very difficult relationship all my life.
Yeah.
And then she was dying of cancer, and taking care of her and having to deal with the closeness and the intimacy with somebody that I knew could also hurt me. And that's where the idea of the movie, right after my mom passed away, I was like, oh, 3 sons, a judge, a kid, that a tragedy that they've all buried. The mom dies. He has to come home for the funeral and he wants to get the hell out of there. But I built it like a Western, even though it's a legal Western. And it was, dad's the sheriff. Here's the other sons. Here's the son that was the quick shot. He left town because his sheriff was and him didn't get along. He comes back for his mother's funeral just to show up. They don't really talk. And he tries to leave, but now these bad guys are coming for his dad. And the only person that can protect him is him. So he stays. And that's what the movie was based on, that idea. And written for Downey, you know, with Downey.
Amazing. And I think it's so personal. I mean, I've talked with so much creators and they always talk, like I got to interview someone who wrote a Hawkeye comic book called Matt Fraction. And the writer's dog passed away before he wrote the book. And in the book, there's this iconic dog. Now, everyone knows the dog from Hawkeye. So when art can come from something like that, from some emotional standpoint, it makes it so much more personal, I feel, for the audience.
I've learned that when you're drawing on your personal experience, something magic always happens. Look, in Wedding Crashers, I was a nerdy kid with braces. I was 5'4" when I got into, you know, I liked movies and Dungeons and Dragons, and there was no chance I was getting any girls. Okay. It just wasn't going to happen. And I was smart enough to know that. And so my relationships with my guy friends were really, really tight. And when you go to parties, you're with your guys, and, you know, there was a blokeism that I loved and that I felt protected by. Now, when one of them fell in love with a girl and all of a sudden she's going to every party with you and he's no longer around, you're like, what the fuck? That change from friendship into, you have to get through the growth so that you can meet each other again. And
it's real life. Yeah.
It's real. And that's what I put into Wedding Crashers. And that was not in the script. That was something that I brought in and designed. And the scene at the Lincoln Memorial, one day we'll look back and we'll say we were young and stupid. Well, we're not that young anymore.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah.
That stuff was all the stuff to set up that arc. In Eurovision, you know, I had been off making movies for years and really missing my family and not knowing it. I was a bit of a workaholic.
Yeah.
But realizing that she had music too, and realizing that I had just gone through that in my own life. So I was like, let's make the movie about him realizing about her, because that wasn't in there.
Yeah.
And it was Will's idea when we talked about it. He goes, maybe she wrote a song that he's never. That's where we ended up getting her singing that song at the end of the movie. That was the story that really gelled it. So I think you should always, and sometimes it's a mystery why you pick the material. Yeah. And then you realize, oh my God, my subconscious was locking onto this for a reason.
Yeah, totally.
There's a movie I'm circling right now about a very cantankerous rock star. I can't say who it is, that they're making a movie of. And it was so funny. It's a very funny movie.
A biopic, kind of?
A biopic, yeah. And what was really funny to me was it's about all the relationships he destroyed by being an asshole. Now, I'm not an asshole, and I don't treat people badly, and I don't yell on set or any of that stuff.
Yeah, you definitely, you strike me as a very nice person. So, I mean, I can't.
Yeah, look, I got to do what I love for a living. I think every day I get to do this work, I'm blessed, and I really am very grateful. So I'm not mad on set. But I've had relationships throughout this journey that have, everybody will eventually not realize, God, that was really me, you know, when that thing happened. And I love this script. I thought it was so funny and so inventive. And then I realized, as usual, right before I was supposed to talk to the producers, I was like, well, I have some of these stories, because the movie's about him making up with those people and trying to, you know, in his old age say, shit, I screwed up. Yeah. And I had a lot to say about it. And it was one of the things that really attracted me to the film. So I do think, by the way, that's the other thing. And I believe this is important. And it doesn't mean, look, as a kid that came up in a middle-class white home in a suburban Maryland, DC. Yeah. It's not like I had stories to tell like rappers do.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Or women trying to make it in the world, or Lizzo, or Billie Eilish being young and talented. You know what I'm saying? And dark. And these people are.
We're all products of our environment, you know, man.
But it is the thing, and I don't remember who said write what you know. And
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
but like if you're making a science fiction movie, you know, about isolation, if you're making, you know, something like Alien, you have to
Or
understand.
Moon by Duncan Jones.
Dude, like that's a perfect example. That's an emotional masterpiece, right? It's so intense and weird and losing his mind and himself, and it gets even weirder. That movie goes from wait a minute, am I watching?
I
It's
love
so
Duncan
crazy.
Jones so much. It's just like, I mean,
I
he's a
know.
clone, and it's like, it's the most crazy boss of the wall. But yeah, man,
No, no,
totally.
that was the craziest. Like I did not, I thought it was a figment of his imagination. And then I'm like, oh my God, and he's going through the same emotional state each time. It was so intense. I think that those things are things that we all have in us, but you got to find your way of putting them in. So yeah, you got to write,
Yeah.
you got to make good decisions in your casting for people that can say your lines, and you got to make it about yourself in some way. You know, I think it's an interesting thing. All right, District 9 is a masterpiece of a movie, one of my favorites.
Yeah, I got to interview Neil, and like that's just masterpiece of a film.
But he watched, like the way he could tell that story from where he comes from
South
is
Africa, growing up looking at this segregation, it's
unbelievable. And that's where I think like we all do have something to contribute. You sometimes it may be harder to find, but we all see things and understand things that we're trying to communicate and share with each other, connect about, and that's where your power is. You
dude.
know, by the way, your power is your enthusiasm and your
Ah,
crazy knowledge of filmmaking at your age and your love of it. And it was your love of the game that pulled me in. I was definitely going to say yes, but the minute I saw your interview with Duncan, I was like, oh my God, his questions are good. He's not trying to get people to say things about actors and stuff, which is
oh
what,
yeah.
by the way, 99% of our interviews are about, and what was funny that happened on set. And you're like,
what? How much of it is improv? You know, is that
by the way, which on Wedding Crashers, that was the big thing.
Yeah,
Zero.
yeah,
0% improv. That's like I think that's talking down to those actors. They
yeah.
helped rewrite the script. They were involved in writing lines. We worked on it in rehearsals for 3.5 weeks. I do a real rehearsal process like theater. And in that process, a lot was created. But by the time they went and performed it, they had to perform it and make it feel like it was all happening. And that's the beauty of what happens, by the way, when you rehearse
Yeah.
and know what you're doing, is the illusion becomes real. And that's what I was saying in the very beginning. When I walked on set that very first time at 14 and went, how do you make this real? It's so false.
I know, dude.
It's that Picasso thing, you know, it's a lie that tells the truth about life.
Hey, David, we've come full circle. I cannot
Yeah,
thank you enough for taking the time to show me, sir.
uh,
You are genuinely one of the kindest filmmakers I've been fortunate
very
enough to
sweet.
chat with.
Well, I was in Dublin earlier this year. Next time I'm
Dude,
around,
if
I'd love
you're
to.
done, you have to let me know. You have to. I'll have a stack of posters for you to sign. Before we
Okay.
finish up, is there anything you can promote, or can people follow you on social media? Anything like that?
I have no social media. That's so sweet. You know, someone sent me pictures on Facebook 10 years ago, and I had to sign up in order to get the pictures downloaded or something, or I couldn't figure it out. And I signed up, and like 5 days later, there were people sending me scripts and all kinds of and I was
Oh,
like,
David.
oh, I can't do this. I can't. I'm just uncomfortable. I feel like I have to read them all. So
Wedding Crashers, but in space. You
yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly. I get those. I do get those. Yeah.
David, it's
I'll
truly
smile
been
it.
an honor. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, Daniel. Good luck
Everyone,
with it.
before we finish up, you can follow me over on Twitter at SamboGizmo1. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, if you have the means, please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children's Society. I will see you all in the next video. David, it's been a true, genuine honor. Everyone, go check out David's work. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Bye.